Welcome back to Paper Cut Crafts. Today we're going to do a tri-fold accordion card. This is my template. I always like to make a template so that I have something visual to see. So the measurement is 12 inches by 5.5. So I'm going to use the DSP from Stampin'Up to make this card. Then we're going to score at 2, 4, 8, and 10 inches. And then also going to cut between the 2-inch marks from both ends at 1.5 from the top and the bottom. So you have 2 strips. And I just use a sharp knife. So when we're folding this, this is going to be a Mountain Valley accordion fold. The folds on the top and bottom follow each other, but the folds in the middle are reversed. So you get a fun fold in effect in the middle. And the front and the back piece, or rather the middle piece, will only have 2 folds opposed to the 4 on the top and the bottom. This creates a fun effect for the front, and you have a bigger space for your front pieces, mats, and design on the front, as well as any sentiments that you want to put in the center or on the back piece. For this card, I'm going to stamp with the Good Morning Magnolia set. I'm going to use the big magnolia flower, and I'm going to use this on the front, and the smaller flower as well as the leaves for design in the inside. I'm using Memento Black to stamp this with, and the Whisper White cardstock. Since I am going to cut this out with the die cuts, I am not going to worry too much about the placement. And I will just stamp this, and then I do plan on coloring it with the blends. Just a fun note about how I color with my blends. I always start with the lighter blend color. This way I get a base color to go with to start with, and then I take my darker blend and I kind of follow the shadows of the stamp, or if there are no shadows I kind of make my own, and I just do the highlights with the darker, and then I go over it again with the light, and I use that to actually blend the color in. Sometimes I'll color the whole image again with the lighter, and sometimes I will just do over the shadows edge just to lighten up that edge of the darker color, and it gives it a nice looking effect. So when I colored this flower, I didn't have a blends of the matching color for the DSP, so I just used the marker and I outlined the flowers lines and petals with another, this is the espresso marker, and it just kind of brought out that highlight a bit more. So if you don't have blends, you can still make a nice effect using the regular markers. So I've gone ahead and I've cut out my images with a Magnolia memory die set. I like to use a little piece of cheap washi tape just to keep the die in place while I run it through my machine. And I'm just going to punch these out real quick and move on to my other pieces. I've also gone ahead and punched out these two pieces. They're also in the die set. It's just an outline of the flower with the background piece. These are also some edge pieces. I've also cut out with the old olive cardstock some extra leaves. A good rule of thumb with certain things like leaves is odds look nicer. It's an aesthetic thing. So the background of this flower is just the whisper white, and when I put the outline on it, it looked very bare and did not quite match the whole theme of my card. So I decided to take my marker and just color the inside so I had the same color scheme as the other flowers as well as the paper. And I'm just coloring that in and measuring, see where my edge is. I use the fine tip glue pen to attach this onto the background color, and it just followed the die itself. Just basically drew along all the edges and just attached it to my base and added some weight till it was stuck down. And now back to the card. I'm going to use this big magnolia that I've colored earlier, and I'm just going to attach that to the front panel. I'm just lining it up, making sure that I have all my pieces on the card. This is a pretty big flower, so I want to make sure it's all on there. When attaching the adhesive to the back, I want to make sure that I am only applying it to where it's actually going to touch the card. Since this does fold in a different way, I don't want to have it attaching to the parts that are actually on the inside of the card, and then my card won't open properly. I'm just going to use the snail to do this with, and then test it to make sure that it opens and closes the way I'm wanting it to. And now I'm just going to add all my inside pieces that I would like and trim them as needed. Mostly I'm going to be using the snail and the mini glue dots. This little magnolia flower gave me a little bit of trouble. I wasn't quite sure where I wanted it, so I was placing it around in different areas of the card, seeing how it looked, both in the card and when it was closed. Sometimes these inside middle panel pieces, they show, and you can attach little pieces there and they kind of make a neat effect coming through. But with this card that just didn't work. So I decided that I was going to use the rest of my Whisper White piece that I used for the magnolia as an inside sentiment area. So I just measured it by eye and using my trimmer. This is not a Stampin' Up! Trimmer. We do have one, but this I had before I became a demonstrator and it still works, so I use it. And I'd measured and cut it out, and I'm just attaching that with the snail. And this is what I'm going to put my magnolia flower on. I decided that I wanted to attach my centerpiece right at this moment, and I failed to realize that I wanted the leaves behind it. So this should have been done before I put the flower in, and so now I'm having to try and get those leaves underneath the flower because snail does not always come out real nice right after. It's a permanent adhesive. So I'm just sliding in the glue dots underneath the piece that is not quite stuck down to get my leaves in underneath. It was a bit difficult, so I suggest making sure you have all your leaves where you want them to be before you stick your flower down. And here is my final card. I appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe, and happy stamping!